Today's painting session is a lovely soft painting with very few colors. It's entitled Serenity, and let's go up to the canvas and see what we're going to start with today. We have a stretch canvas, and I have a picture from a calendar of a beautiful swan and the babies. We're not going to do this rendering of it, but I love to have reference material that I can use that give me ideas, and I can use it for structuring and shadowing. It's very important to have good reference material. Well, I've already done a tracing on the canvas. The tracing was done by getting the shape that I want using graphite paper and then tracing it onto the canvas. After I got the tracing on, I used a art appeal, which is an adhesive backed paper, to protect the drawing underneath. This allows the paint to stay out of this area as I build the background. Here are a few other reference pictures that would be very helpful in the structure of the face, the detail in the eyes and all. I'm going to keep this one handy when I get to that area. This is another interesting position for the swan. So we have a number of swan pictures. This happens to be I believe a white Canada geese, and then I have some other swan pictures with different lighting. So any one of these particular pictures could be used in the painting. So we have a simple structure to start with. Let's go down to the palette, and we'll get a little wash color so that I can mark in where some of my darks are going to be. The basic coloring today is going to be pinks and violets and lavenders, and it's a very popular coloring to work with. Let's get some mineral spirits into a bristle brush with some violet, a little bit of gray, and come up to the canvas, and let's decide where our darks are going to be. I've already kind of put a pencil line sketch in where the back of the lake is going to be. There's going to be some little foliage and things up in here. This is going to be quite dark in here. And when I first put a little stain on the canvas, because this isn't thick paint, I like to kind of wash it in and soften it. So I really just get a little application for positioning. There's a thin line here that's going to go just and break the top edge of the swan's head. And there's going to be a smaller little grouping of trees in here. And then maybe in the distance, a little faint suggestion of far away. This gives more depth and dimension by getting these three different areas in here. The swan, let me go down and get a little bit more paint on the brush. We're going to reflect pretty nicely. And I'm going to do a little mirror image structuring for shadowed reflection in the swan. And I just want to kind of get a little stain on the canvas to start that structure. So I have a mirrored image illusion of the swan. This is mostly just positioning. We're going to bring that shadow on the water a little further of his tail. That means that this is a little flatter because this is raised up. Okay, that's basically structuring. Later we'll reapply more paint. In the water, we want these little ripples and shadow lines, and if you take the brush and kind of slide it kind of right and left, you can begin to get the feeling of a slight chop to the water. And I like to get a few of these darks in to help give me the feeling of the flow. It gives me an overall mood to the painting. And sometimes I put a little trailing or a path. I make kind of a V structure. And by doing that, I can get the water kind of like a wake behind him. Okay, that's pretty much just our positioning sketch, and that's about all you need to do. Now we're going to keep the colors quite simple. As we go down to the palette, we'll use a large brush for block in. And I've already pre-mixed on the brush and loaded the brush, starting with some white. And I want you to see on the white palette here how dark the color is I'm starting, because I really don't want to start too light. So I've added into some soft basic white, a lot of pink, a little bit of violet, and a little cerulean blue until I get kind of a dull pinkish gray. And this is the lightest value that I want to start with in this background. So we'll come up, start in the sky area, and you can see against the white canvas that that's pretty dark looking at this stage. But it won't be when I start getting the other colors of the canvas on and the whites of the canvas is eliminated. This will allow the swan to be stronger in its contrast. Let's bring a little of this light out at the chest of the swan. That would be a nice area for a little glow in front of him. Okay, there isn't too much right behind him, maybe just right underneath the tail, so that seems to be reflecting in the water and will kind of backlight the swan. This will allow him to be a little more in silhouette, more of a backlit effect. And I'll clean the brush off a little bit there. As I go down to the palette, I'm just going to keep adding varying shades of cerulean blue into my mix to get it maybe a little bluer in some instances. But first I want to make sure I get a little darker each time. So I use the same mixing spot, add the coloring to it, and just change the tinting slightly. Okie doke. I think we've got enough stronger tint. When I come up to the canvas, when I touch the canvas, I want it to be darker than what I originally had on. So this becomes my lightest color. Every color that I add from this point will be darker, so that this will become a very light value once I get the white of the canvas covered. Okay, we want to do a little bit up at the distant back end of the lake with this. See, this dark now will allow the framing of the swan's head to be good contrast. And in the water, I streak kind of right and left. Maybe a little bit back here in the wake area. You can see by using a large brush I can work pretty rapidly. A little more white in the mixture just to stretch the paint. And this time we'll go just a little bit stronger with the blues and a little less of the alizarin. And I change the tints each time so that there's more color interest. So when I come up and touch in this area, you can see that does have a bluer tint. I look for the unpainted areas and begin to sweep. Now when there's a narrow strip, I turn the brush on its edge. When I want a wide band of color, I just go ahead and use it full width to save a lot of time that way. Okay, just looking for a block in. And you can see how I've already gone into the reflection area, but there isn't much paint there. Okay, a little bit of this blue up in the upper sky area. I kind of make sure I reconnect to the last strip of coloring that I previously put on so that they merge gently. This is some pretty coloring. Let's start introducing a little violet. This is just a straight violet. Violet's a very powerful color, and kind of wore this shirt because it got me in the mood to get into the violets and the purples. Okay, I think this is going to work nicely to come down, start putting in, again streaking with the large brush. And you can just see how I just kind of rub. It's almost like painting a wall. A little more fun though. Okay, keep adding colors. While I go back to just a little touch more of the blue tone, this is a little more cerulean in the color, I'm going to start thinking about this little back area behind the swan's head and go in there with this darker value, and you can see that it's darker than the first color I put on there. And as soon as I start tapping this in with a little bit of a corner of the brush and leveling it down, it starts making this color above it look lighter. And that's what I'm hoping to achieve as I build the darks around it. So I have that coloring there for like a little distant grouping of trees, and all you have to do is fuzzy the top of them with the corner of the brush. Just tap and it'll look a little bit like a faraway grouping. Then we'll give a little bit more of this coloring on the bottom. Now I'm leaving this area up here a little unpainted because I want to reflect a little bit of shadow in the water. This pretty well covers the lower portion of the canvas. As we come up to the top, I'm going to use the same color and do a little bit of area where the sky. I'm going to have bushes and trees here, but I want a little backdrop darker over to the left. Not filling it in solid at this stage. That's nice. This area to the right, I'll go down and mix just a little bit different shading, probably a little on the blue side again. And I just watch my mixes on my palette so that I can adjust them and change them so there's slight changes and differences. Okay, we'll go over here to the right and make sure this is just a little darker than what's in the background. We'll block it in, and it's not really as dark as I'd like it. So what I'll do is I'll go back and darken it a shade more with a little more violet. If you like the blues, you can go stronger on the blues. I think the painting behind me on the wall is a little more on the blue side, and this time I'm going to go a little stronger on the violets. So I have two different renderings of the same type of composition. Yeah, that's a little better now. When I come up to the canvas and I tap, I can see a little more contrast of one color against the other. Just kind of tap a second coating a little darker on there. If you want a little reflection, you pull down vertically with a slight shimmer, but I'm not looking for too much reflection in that. Let's complement the foreground with a few streaks of this, especially the bottom right-hand corner. And then we'll start going up to a lot more color contrast. More violet, a little bit of Payne's gray in it, or black, just to make sure it's kind of dull. I have to watch violet because it really can become a little too gaudy very quickly. Okay, we'll start up here on the left, and we'll start tapping in, and I'm just kind of poking with the brush and getting kind of a bushy type of a tree splotch all over here, and that's why I had these little openings or put a little of the sky darks behind there. And I just kind of tap these on. Using the big brush saves me a lot of time, but at home you could use a little smaller brush and characterize them more refined. Let's go ahead and put a little bit down into here. When I'm reflecting, I like a little vertical pull first. That kind of reflects that illusion. And then I like to gently shimmer it with the edge of the brush and almost distort it a little. Okay, we need more darks. Second load of the brush with this dark color. And if you want to stay with the blues, you just keep adding more blue to the mixture. Prussian's a good mixture to add with the violet, so it's a blue violet. Notice how I tap on the palette with the tips of the brush. That helps kind of keep the paint right up on the tips. This is darker. Again, I'm staying in the lower shadowed portions of the bushes, so I get more variety. And that leaves the tops filtering more light into them. And I'm trying to get this as bushy looking as I can. Let's go right down underneath the waterline a little bit and pull that down a little more. So that gives me a nice shadowing on the water. That's my base tint. While I have this dark on the brush, I think I'm going to come in here and go under the belly of the swan into that area that I was starting. You can see a little bit of my guide of the reflection. But again, I'm not worried about a lot of paint. I'm just getting an initial covering on. To develop the paints further into the water, you can switch and use a fan brush and put stronger, brighter lights. I think we'll do a little strong pinkish color and enhance some areas. We'll go with a fan brush, red and white into the color mix, and we'll sweep in a few little areas up here underneath the water edge so that we can faintly see, going into shadow, a little bit of the top of the water. And just streaking in a few little lines over there. That gives me a little wind or surface movement on it. A few of these light colors here and there. I think over here on the right, I'm going to wipe my brush and almost bring a little bit of titanium white on the tip edge of the brush and find the top of the lake back here under these trees with a little skim of lighter value. And so I began to see little glints of light on the surface illusion of the water. And a few times you can break the edge of your reflection, and that makes a nice illusion there. This is a little bit of simplification, although you can spend more time and stretch your colors. I do plan on putting some more darks in there, but let's put a little bit down here on the bottom and get a little more movement in the water. First I'm putting a little lights, then I'll wipe the brush, and I'll go back with some really strong dark contrast. Now using the fan brush, it doesn't blend quite as much as the large brush. The large brush puts more blending in, so I can really just kind of streak some areas. If I have too much paint, I just wipe the brush. I want to darken this corner just a little bit. The more I wipe the brush, the softer the colors will melt. That means I'm applying less paint. I like that. All right, we've got a little bit of a rough end now for the background, and although I want a little more glare on the water, I think I'm going to wait until I develop the swan before I be too concerned with refining the background. Let's remove the little protective covering of adhesive-backed contact-like paper, and the art appeal will just peel right off. Approach it from the bottom. Sometimes I just tap on the knife and it'll stick to it. There's no paint on the knife. And pull that right off. And we have a little piece that's right there. Try to carefully not smudge the paints. Now before I had put the art appeal on, you can see I put a little black acrylic, or you can use permanent marker, and find the shaping of the face. To start the swan, I'm going to work first with a small brush and base him in with a little paint, and then I'll develop his lights and darks better. Let's go down to the original coloring that I had of the purple tint in the water. And I think I'll keep for reference the head picture up here so that we can look at it occasionally. Up underneath their neck there's a pretty dark shadow, so I want to go up underneath this neck area and capture that dark shadow so that his head will come out from it a little bit. Run a little shadow line down the middle of his neck and make sure I get these separation edges. These little dark lines that were in my original sketch will help create form and contour to the bird. These are the shadows that are needed. And that's the darkest darks that would be in there, a little bit around his beak, maybe just a touch. Then I wipe the brush, and I'm going to go to more of a bluish tint. Now I'm using titanium, and I'm not using the soft white because the soft white would flow too easily. So I'm using titanium white from a tube, adding some of the colors. And let's see if we can get a little bit up on the top of the bird. This is very close to the background color, so I'm not going to go quite to the edge. We'll block in the basic shading, and then we'll bring some light out on his edges. We'll restate the lights last. So you can see this color is not as dark as the first initial shadow tint I put in. And I just rub it and kind of scrub it. I have a little small flat brush that I'm working with. This is just the initial application, and I stretch the paint fairly lean. Even with that same coloring, I may put a few little movements up here on the water. Just a little, well, it's not grabbing too well, so we'll come back to that with a little softer paint. Okay, I'm going to wipe the brush, go down, and pick up a little more violet-y color. This is a little violet into that same mixture. And all I'm doing is looking for a little different tinting for color interest. So I'm adding violet from the tube, a little bit of soft, creamy white, and let's see if we can find the edges now. This should be lighter than the other color I have, and we'll block it in just to start getting him based in. You can see he almost gets lost into the background, but then you accent your lights on top of that. So we need an initial coating that isn't our lightest lights. We want to just barely see a block in of the swan against the background. Basic shape, basic coverage. Don't want to lose all that nice dark I had also. So now he barely shows up. I need to restate my darks because I've almost lost them. So let's go back down to the darker purple, reload that on the little brush, and come back up and look for the shadowing underneath. In this particular picture, there's a lot of shadowing under the bone of the wing here, and the feathers are backlit a little bit, but we don't have quite that much structure. This is a different one. But I am going to shadow a little bit more in certain areas to restate it. And I feel it's necessary to get all these contrast colors on. And as soon as you put lights on, you begin to lose your darks. So you have to be careful not to lose all the contrast. And I stroke with feather strokes. Underneath the bottom of the bird, we could put a little bit of extra dark for under the tail feather. That kind of pops it out. Let's go down to the palette for just a minute. I'm going to wipe my brush. I'm going to get a violet and black mix. Now this is pretty well straight from the tube, so the paint's kind of grabby. And I want to restate that reflection. If you don't want it to be too dull, instead of using a black, ivory black mixture, you can use a Payne's gray, because Payne's gray will keep it a little more on the blue side. All right, let's come up and see if we can go ahead and do a little bit more of that reflective illusion of the neck. I want to kind of get the idea of where that was in there, and we want to bring it in so we restate it so there's a little more of a reflective illusion, a little more distinctive. Notice I'm not trying to paint him too detailed. This way I get lots of color interest and color value in this. Okay, I'm going to wipe the brush, go get kind of a pinkish white. That's what I'm going to use for my light, is a little pinkish white. I'm going to load the brush heavily, but then I'm going to wipe off one side of the brush so that I really only have paint on one edge, and I can begin to kind of find the edge. I have to reload that edge of the brush fairly often. Here's going to be the top of the head. See how that pops him out against the background a little bit? And edge the swan. Might have to use a little whiter white. If he doesn't stand out in enough contrast, what I'll end up doing is I'll give him a little bit of a dark edge silhouette. In fact, I think I'll do that just so he will be a little stronger in contrast to the background. Yeah, I think that worked pretty well. Now if he has a bump on his head, use the handle and just kind of rub off the bump on his head. Blend that in a little. We don't want him with a bump on his head. We'll work a little bit on the beak in just a minute. I think he looks better silhouetted in contrast with more of a dark tinting than a light tinting on the edges, especially where the color of the water is light. So we'll use a dark shadowing. I'm going to come in and start bringing a little bit of feather strokes on the back. And you have to study the reference pictures. I have one down here I'm kind of glancing at. And let's bring one up. Well, let's see, we'll use this one. His feathers aren't as high up on this one. They're higher on the other picture, but this one's a little easier for me to use for reference. I want to get a little more light up over the back feathers of the wing, stroking them in, a little on the top of the tail feather. And that actually sticks up a little bit. And a little down in between his wings. It's quite light right back in here, and that'll help pop his neck out. All right, we'll use a little bluish white for reflective lights on the side of the swan. The blue whites are really beautiful. I think you can almost see that in there. And I'm going to bring some on the front center part of his neck to kind of make it rounded with more contour. Let's go in with a little bit of a, we'll start with a little bit of a brownish tint and block in his beak. Where this marker is, I'm just going to kind of tap in a little extra dark, shadow underneath where his eye would be, kind of base it in, and then I'll switch to a liner brush so that I can not go outside of my lines too much. There's a little bit of goldish tint on the tips of the beak. I'm using a violety black so that I won't get green when I put a little gold in it, but this is going to just darken in the entire beak at this stage, and then I'll put a little bit of light in it. I'm trying not to get it too blackish, but I see it more as a light, but I want to base him in so that I get the contrast. Should be using that other reference picture, but we'll just kind of soften it in. While I've got this liner brush, I think I'll try to get just a little more edge on the top of his head with the dark. It's hard to distinguish where the edge of his head is, so I'm going to do him with a shadowed silhouette, more so than the light, and make sure that that blends out into the background trees. I can either lighten behind him to make a contrast of one standing out from the other, or I can darken, one of the two. So let's get a little light up on the top of the beak. And we're going to use a little orangey tint. It has an orange glow to it. Now don't do too much more to the water other than refine the look of it. Sometimes I sparkle, spatter paint a little bit so I get a glistening feeling to it. But I think the time needs to be spent on the feathers and the detail work and developing the enhancement in here and the feathers here. There isn't quite enough structuring in the wings. You can take a liner brush and spend a lot of times separating the feathers by putting a stronger dark under it. Initially I had the dark right underneath the lines, but if you take a little stronger dark and put in thin lines, you separate them even better. Let's even give a little bit of this back. That's the other wing, and this is wing. We're kind of giving him two wings, and there's a back section behind him. And I'm even blending with the tip of this liner brush. A little underline under the beak, too. That helps give him an outline silhouette. It puts a little bit of light on the front of him. I think he needs a little more outlining. I think that works pretty well. Wiping the brush and softening the inside edge will connect it better to the original paint that's there. Well, let's see. We need some more refinement in the water, so I'm going to use the liner continually. And right where he's sitting in the water, I want to bring just a little bit of more movement and break that edge, not too far out in front of him, and put some more little ripply lines in there, more contrast and interest. And if the lines get too sharp, I just wipe the brush and soften them. I think we've pretty well got the mood of the lavenders and violets. There's a lot more I could be doing to this one, but I think I've had running out of time. Take these reference pictures or take your own reference pictures and see if you can capture a swan and get a nice serene feeling. I've enjoyed doing this one for you, so I hope you'll come back and join me again for a future show.